Hi, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to this week's episode of the Intuition Lab. This week, I'm going to be talking about finding the courage to trust your intuition. It's all well and good to tune in, listen, and receive advice from your higher self, but sometimes taking action can be a little frightening. I'm going to talk about 5 ways in which you might doubt your intuition or feel a little anxious about following it, and what to do about it so you can get on track, and follow the aligned advice you've been given. So, what's a possible reason that you might hear your intuition and not want to follow the advice you receive? Well, the first is that maybe you still doubt your intuition. And that is completely valid, especially if this is new to you. So, to get around this, you need to take time to build confidence, build trust in the information you receive. I did an episode about validating your hunches, and I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But in it, I talk about how you can gather data. So, when you have a hunch about something, note the date and the time, the information you receive, and then track what the actual results are, like what happens, and then evaluate how far off are you from what actually happened. How did you receive this information? You know, did you get a gut feeling? Did you get an image? Did you hear something? Did you just have a knowing? You need to build confidence and validate your intuitive hits. Another reason is that you may not trust yourself. You may be somewhat lacking in self trust. And that can be difficult, especially if you have made, like me, really big mistakes in the past and you go looking outside of yourself for validation or advice. And while it's all well and good to get information from a variety of sources, ultimately you are a decision maker in your life. And there are whole, I'm sure, programs, books, treatises on how to build your self trust. So I encourage you to seek those resources out, and maybe I will do an episode about that at some point. But if you're doubting your intuition, you may need to either validate the information you're receiving because it's fair. You want to see if the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, but also to build trust in yourself. And I will say quickly, one way to do that is to make yourself small promises and keep them so that you know you can trust yourself to take action that is for your highest good. Because sometimes we continue to do things that we know aren't good for us because we don't really trust ourselves to make the right choices for us. So start by keeping small promises to yourself and definitely do a bit of research to find some resources on building your self trust if that's something you need to work on. Now, a second reason you may be reluctant to trust your intuition and follow through on the advice you've received is that others around you think you're nuts, which I have a lot of experience with, or are being unreasonable. So, the first way to get around this is that sometimes you need to move in silence. Not everyone close to you is going to have your back, and they are not necessarily going to have your back on every change you want to make in life, especially if it's going to affect them. It might be for your greater good, but it might not be for theirs, or it might just create a lot of discomfort for them. So, unless you're really, really, really sure that someone is your cheerleader and is happy for you and is happy to see you make progress in life, share less until you have started down your path and you've got enough momentum and trust and reassurance of your own behind you before you start sharing about what you're doing. So you may need to move in silence if the people around you are not supportive. Now, another thing you need to know is that your intuition is here to serve you first and foremost, not anybody else. So just because the other people around you think you're nuts doesn't mean that you're not on the right track. And it does take a lot of courage and a lot of self knowledge and self love to continue on a path that you know is right for you, even if people around you aren't so happy about it, aren't so keen on what you're doing. But remember, your intuition and the information you receive is primarily here to serve you. Occasionally it's for a loved one, but 95-98% of the time it is for you. And I mean, at the end of the day, it is your life. You're in the driver's seat most of the time. And even if you're not, you can still make choices that align with you and your perspective to the greatest extent possible. So, you may not trust your intuition because other people around you doubt it, but also look at how trustworthy are they? What is their bias towards the world? Do they have a negative bias? Do they constantly think that bad things are happening to them? Some of the people who doubt your gut instincts are people who are the architects of their own misery because they don't listen to their own intuition. So just know that this is your gift. This is here to serve you. And, it wouldn't be here if you didn't need it. Next, you've been wrong before. You were really, 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 really sure that a situation would pan out a certain way, and it didn't. And I've been in that position myself, and I'm someone who's been very intuitively aligned my whole life. But sometimes I've been wrong. And quite often I've been wrong because I really, really, really wanted something, and I didn't listen to my intuition as much as I should have. I listened to what I wanted. That little insistent, I would say egoic voice, so I'm not much of a psychologist, but I didn't listen to that still small voice inside of me, and I made poor choices. But if you were really sure that something was going to happen this way and it didn't, there are a few reasons for that. One is that your intuition is a muscle. You have to flex it consistently, like working out to build muscle and tone your body. You have to do it consistently to see results. So keep validating your hunches, keep listening to that little voice within. You may have been wrong before, but it doesn't mean that, you won't be correct again and you won't be correct in the future. The thing is, we don't get it right 100% of the time. And I don't think we're meant to. Life is meant to surprise us, both for good and for ill. But I think that we can reliably, a high percentage of the time, correctly interpret the signs that we're being given. And the more you use your intuition, the greater your percentage of being correct will be. So maybe at some point you'll be correct 98% of the time, right? Or you may not be totally wrong, but you may not get it on the nose, and that's fine. But the other thing to look at is, why were you wrong when you made this certain prediction for yourself? Now, I hesitate to use that word, but I'm just going to call it that. Were you overexcited or overwrought? Were you really fixated on getting one thing when you really maybe needed or wanted something a little different? And I go into this a bit in my episode about the energetic five state, which I'll also post a link to in the show notes. Um, when we are not balanced, when we are not at our energetic five, if you think of it as 0 to 10, if you haven't listened to any of my other podcasts, think of your energetic five as being in the middle, calm, slightly stimulated, but not overly happy, not overly sad, just sort of a going with the flow type place. This is where we are most ready to see and most able to see things as they are and not as we would like them to be. Because I find that when I have been completely wrong on an issue, it's because I ignored those subtle signs. I got caught up in either excitement or negativity, and it completely skewed how I view and assess a situation. But we're human, we make mistakes. But with intuitive practice, you will make fewer of them. Another reason you might be reluctant to trust your intuition and follow through on what it's telling you is that the next step you are meant to take is just flat out scary. You know, Following your intuition won't always be easy. There's this old song, I think, called child, I never promised you a rose garden. Following your intuition doesn't mean the right path will not be rocky. But if you don't follow your intuition, I promise you that the heat will be turned up. Quite often, those little whispers we get, I'm saying a whisper, but it can be, like the first sign, the first subtle energy shift you perceive, might point you towards having to take action that frightens you or doing something you really, 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 really don't want to do. But as I said, if you think it's scary to follow the first glimmer, wait until you go down the road a bit and things really aren't working out. Then you've got a bit of a mess to clean up. Whereas if you had just heeded the call at first, you'd be on your maybe somewhat rocky path. Until you have the courage to listen to that first glimmer and take action, then you will just make life more difficult for yourself. When we move forward in faith, even though we're a bit scared, you make it easier on yourself. Even if you're doing something difficult, you may have less mental angst. You may have less emotional bandwidth taken up by the issue. So, just that in itself will make your life easier. And this is probably my favorite because it's sort of where I am right now. If you are reluctant to trust your intuition and follow it where it leads, it might be because what comes next involves a lot of work or real deep seated change. And that's messy. Sometimes we just tell ourselves, oh, I'm lazy, I don't want to do it, or oh, I'm overwhelmed. And one or both and other things may well be true. But I mean, sometimes in life, we just have to do the work. You know, it's, I'm going to do a little tangent here. Sometimes it's popular in manifestation circles to talk about how you just need to visualize and you will draw it to you. But sometimes often the opportunity being drawn to you involves work. Things usually don't just show up on our doorstep unless it's a delivery of the cat or puppy delivery service. And you can look that up if you haven't heard of it. It's the tendency for some people to just have new pets appear out of the woodwork, or they just find pets, or a small dog or a kitten follows them home or something. But the way to get around this overwhelm with the lot of work you are being guided to do is to sort of project manage your life a little. Sit down and say, if I am being required to make this change, like if you are being called on to move, what are all the steps I need to do to make that happen? Sometimes you can find checklists online, sometimes you can get online help with figuring that out. But just map out what you think it is and then just intuitively take a look at each step and say, how can I make this easier on myself? Is this something I really need to do? Can I collapse a few of these steps? I mean, in order to tackle even the biggest hurdle, you quite often don't need to have the whole plan. You just need to have your next best step or two to make progress. And then when you are wrapping up that step or you're in the middle of it, you can ask, what's next? What's next? You can always ask your intuition to show you what's next, to show you the road ahead. And I'd like to wrap up by saying that it takes a lot of courage to trust your intuition, but you have to know that whatever your intuition is telling you is for your best and highest good. So maybe that will ease your and my way a bit when it comes to being brave enough to follow the advice you've been given. So if you find that you're in a position where you find it hard to take action and you're overwhelmed, and maybe you're hearing your intuition clearly, but you're having a hard time trusting it, or you're not hearing it clearly, you'd like to hear it in a more, I would say, rational way, a way that you can digest, I encourage you to sign up for my new community that's launching in September 2025 called Pathfinders. And I'll include a link to sign up. It's completely free. It'll be over Telegram for now. And it will help you make big changes in life to intuitively make a choice to build trust in your intuition, to take aligned action, and be in a community of people who are most likely a disinterested third party in what you're trying to do. And it is a non judgmental, very grounded, action oriented space. We're not just here to talk about intuition and manifestation. We are here to apply these tools in our day to day life so we can lead the lives that we want to live. So, if that sounds good to you, I encourage you to sign up, or you can just follow me on Instagram at the underscore intuition underscore lab, and there'll be more information posted as we get closer to launch. Probably be mid September, I'm thinking at this point. But in the meantime, I am sending you so much love. I hope you can tap into your intuition and that it gives you comfort. And I will see you next week. Bye.